guys, what's up? This is Ron Cacchetti here, your host for the Brain Dump podcast. Today we're going to be diving into an episode with Chris Clarkson, my cousin, and he wrote the book That Summer Night on Frenchmen Street. We're going to go into talking about, novels, writing, getting published, just books, creativity, everything like that. So it's going to be a really good episode. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to a new episode of the Brain Dump podcast. This is actually my cousin, Chris Clarkson. He is a novelist and he just wrote his first book, I believe. Sorry, what was it called again?
Yep, it's called That Summer Night on Frenchmen Street, and it's actually not my first book. It's one
Oh,
of many books, but it is my first published book.
your first published book. Okay, that's
That's right.
awesome.
Thanks,
So
Rob.
welcome him. And how did you get started with writing and all the way from, I guess, take me all the way back and then up
All the way
to
back.
how you got your first published book done.
Yeah. Um, so I guess it started when I was a kid. A lot of kids, they like to, like play hide and seek, play sports, swim. But what I love to do the most was write. So a lot of times, like instead of going outside, I would just find a corner like to sit, and I would have my loose leaf paper and my pen, and I would just like tape all the pages together and create stories that could be anywhere from 25 pages to 100 pages. And so ever since childhood, it just was something that I always enjoyed doing. And so when I was a kid, I was usually writing about kids, but as I got older, I would like, go to high school students. But even now that I'm an adult, I'm still really enjoying writing young adult. So that's the area that I'm at now.
Cool. So you sort of like take your inspiration from like, what you see around you, or how do you sort of like get inspiration for what you write?
So inspiration for me comes from so many places. There are parts of my life where I've been inspired, and I will usually take those pieces of things that I've experienced, and I will give them to my characters and kind of add to a twist to it to make it their own. And also, I can just be observing. So if I go to a coffee shop and I see someone sitting there with colorful hair, then I'll just start to take notes and I can create a character from that. Um, just observation. It just really depends. Like my creativity is just really inspired from daily life, from me, from what I see, from the music I listen to. If I see a building that I really like, it can just come from anywhere, really.
That's awesome. And do you prefer, so you write mostly fiction? Um,
I write fiction. Mostly, usually always, I will be writing fiction. And I usually write fiction because for me, I feel like I live my life all of the time. I'm always in my shoes. So it's so fun to build a character from scratch and to think about their experiences, to get inside their head. And I'm not sure how many people actually know this, but when I was a kid, I also wanted to be an actor. So it's not something that I really want to be anymore, but it's fun creating these characters, writing their voices, writing their family and friends and their relationships. And it's kind of like acting in a sense because I get to step out of myself and um, basically use a voice that's not my own.
yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I guess like what were some of the challenges you faced like in your journey as far as like writing? Did you always mean to be, a published author, or were you just sort of like doing it for fun? Like did you think that you would ever publish a book, and like how did that happen for you?
That's a great question. So writing was always fun for me. It was always a way to escape. If I was ever stressed out about anything, I would write. And I think that there was a time when writing was kind of a way to disassociate for me. So sometimes that's how I dealt with issues or anything going on in my life. I would write. And usually if I was going through something, my character was always going through something worse. So in a way, it maybe helped me to feel better about whatever I was going through. And it also helped me to process things as well. So I didn't plan on actually being published until I um I started writing fan fiction, and I got some really good feedback that really made me think, let me try to get published. And the journey to getting published was not exactly easy for me. There were lots of rejections, and um, with those rejections, it was kind of hard because writing is so personal. And with it being personal, it's kind of like feeling like a part of you is being rejected, especially since I'm always in my mind. So it's that part was hard, but eventually I started to get used to, you know what, I'm going to send this many query letters to agents and I'll get rejected this amount of times. And every time I had a new book, I would continue to send more and more query letters to agents. And eventually I got one agent to say they were interested. And then from there, Rachel Brooks is now my agent, and I'm published.
That's awesome. Cool. That's cool that you started with like fan fiction. How did you start with that? Like, was there like a series or some like a show that you really liked and you just like wanted to make the characters do what you wanted them to do or like their own thing,
Yes.
or you just had other ways that you wish the story would have went so you did it yourself, or how did
Yeah. So with fan fiction, the reason why I first did that is because there was already an audience. When I was watching a TV show and I wanted to go on more adventures with those characters, I would go to fanfiction.net and I would read other people's stories. And I noticed how readers were reviewing. So a part of me just really wanted that feedback. So at the time I started, I was watching Lost. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that
I
show.
am familiar with it. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Um, so that was one of my favorite shows at the time, and so I started writing fan fiction for Lost, and it wasn't set on the island. It was my own idea. They were living here in the United States, and it was more like an adventure story. But once I started getting the feedback from that story, I wrote several others, and um, yeah, that's why I started fan fiction. I loved the gratification of the reviews and just having people read my work, which I never had until that point, was really cool.
That's awesome. And how do you connect with do you find time to like connect with like other writers still? Is that
Yeah.
something, because I don't know, because I do music and like I feel like every community is different, like every artistic
Mhm.
community. Because with musicians, it's like we either connect, through Instagram or like through um, like forums or like YouTube or just like posting, and then like we'll
Mhm.
comment on it or like I don't know, whatever. Is a writer like is it easier or hard to connect with like other writers, and how do you find that helpful, or just yeah, just tell me about that.
So I've actually been pretty lucky lately. Before I got published, I would say that I didn't really know any writers, but since I've gotten published, I've been lucky to meet writers in some of the panels that I've spoken on when I've gone to some conferences. I have been able to connect. So I'm slowly but surely building a connection of writers. And I'm learning how important that is, especially with writers who have been writing for so much longer than me, like to hear their stories, to, just learn their experiences. And it helps me to really navigate the process of being a writer because I'm still really new in this process. Like while I've been writing for such a long time, I haven't been published less than a year. So it's still so new.
Yeah, that's cool. I took a creative writing class in college, and it really
Mhm.
challenged me to like write. Like we were mostly writing like short form stuff like poems and like stuff that we could actually go over in class, like 1 to 2
Right.
page things like, but I found it really freeing, but also very overwhelming because you can literally write anything you want and there's no
Mhm.
rules.
Yeah.
It's also so difficult because you can do anything you want, like there's so many things that you have to keep in mind for it to flow, for it to like have meaning, for it to come across the right way to other people, for you to get what you're trying
Right.
to say across. Like, I find that so hard. And also, editing is so hard. Like,
Ugh.
because it's so easy to write for me. But I
Mhm.
feel like when you have to look back at your own stuff, that part is like so hard.
I
I'm just
agree.
wondering your thoughts on that.
I'm completely the same way. When I'm writing, I'm so in love with the characters, but when it's time to edit, it's kind of like I don't know these characters. Who wrote this? It was me, but I'm feeling like I don't enjoy the editing process, so that's where I really have to be more gentle with myself during that process because I have definitely stopped in the past. I've stopped writing stories during that editing process because it just was so intensive and it made me lose a little bit of love for my characters and for the writing process. So now I'm just very thoughtful about when I get to the editing process, how I'm going to approach it, and just saving room because I'm my harshest critic during
Mhm.
that editing process. You did make an interesting point about with writing fiction about how it's more free flowing and how that's was kind of hard, like trying to go with the flow. And for me, before I was published, I used to write 1,000-page stories. I would create characters. I would have no ending. I would just keep going. I would let them live their lives on a page, and I would just keep writing and writing and writing. But now that I'm published, there has to be a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that is one of the ways that I've kind of had to adapt to actually, one, finishing a story, and also keeping in mind that the pacing has to be there to actually get that story done.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so do you like going into it, do you have like a plan? Do you have like a storyboard of like how it's gonna end? Do you know how it's gonna end when you start? Or do you sort of just start first and then figure it out?
Starting first would be terrifying to me, just because my mind, I know that it's like a maze. So if I don't have a plan or a path, then it's just going to go in whatever direction it wants to. So I always have an idea of where I want it to start, where I want it to, like the midpoint to be, and how I want it to end. So I always kind of have that idea in mind just to have a path to make my life easier. However, things tend to change along the way. Um, like when I was writing that summer night on Frenchmen Street, there were things that I had not planned where my character was just like, oh, by the way, this happened. And I was like, oh, well, that would have been great to know before. Like we're almost toward the end, but now I'm finding out this information. And it's funny because it's kind of like as a writer, sometimes even though I am the creator and I created these characters, they're still revealing things to me as I'm writing. So even as I'm getting to the end, they're telling me things and they're telling me who they are and showing me who they are up till the very end.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. So it's like almost like they're alive, like they're changing or like your mind changes depending on like what they go through.
It's true. That's definitely it. And when I was writing that story, there was definitely a moment when my character told me something that really took me aback, and it made me think. I was like, "Do I want to write this?" And then I would go back and I would look at the previous pages, and I would see, oh, well, this definitely fits in. It's kind of like the character was revealing little things to me over time. And then here we have this big thing that now they're telling me. And it's not like I have to even do rewrites because it was always in those pages. I just didn't have words for what it truly was, like where we were leading to
Wow.
that conclusion.
That's really cool. So it's almost like something about their character that they have to go through or like a trait about them or like just a piece of information about them? Is that like what it is?
Yeah. Um, Whenever I sit down and write, one of the things that I always do is I always build out the character. So I will start from their childhood. And since they're usually teenagers, I will fill in all of that space in between those years because there's such important information as to who the character is, their relationship with their parents, their relationship with their friends. It will give a bigger picture of who this character is that the reader is meeting today. So I have to know that past because I never want to be writing a story from the beginning and just meeting the character. So I always meet them before I write their very first sentence or I write their introduction. I know their past so I can write about the present day.
Wow, okay. That's cool. And then do you do this for like every character in the book to a certain degree, or is it just like the main characters?
I do it for every character, and that's because any character that's in my book, they have some kind of connection with the main character, whether that's their parent or a friend of theirs. There's some kind of connection that's important for the story. So I will also know their friends and their parents' history, and it tells me how they're going to show up um, in the story.
Okay, cool. And do you have any books, even movies or like stories that you really love?
Yeah. One of my favorite movies is Eve's Bayou. Have you seen that one?
I don't think so.
Okay. Samuel Jackson's in that. Lynn Whitfield, Journey Smollett, Megan Good. And one of my favorite genres to write is Southern Gothic. And that movie is set in Louisiana. It's set during the 1950s, and it's about a Black family. They were descended from slaves, and they own this land. And it's all about their family story. And what I love the most about Eve's Bayou is that even though it's set in the 1950s, it's not focused on external. It's not focused on racial issues and what's going on in Louisiana at the time, but it's really focused on this family. And for me, I just love that because I feel like we don't usually get movies that are focusing on a Black family and what's going on with them internally because the external is so loud during that time, especially in the Deep South. So the family dynamics are so complicated and so dark. And it has a storytelling device where, like in most Southern Gothic literature and movies, where there's so many different sides to one story. So who really knows what the truth is? And so that's why that movie is one of my favorite movies of all time, actually.
Okay, cool. I will check it out. And I actually have never heard of the genre before.
Okay.
Can you explain a little bit about it?
Yeah. So Southern Gothic, like To Kill a Mockingbird. Um, let's see. So um, anything that's set in the South that takes the typical tropes that we're used to, like the plantations and the preachers and the women who stay at home and wait for their husband to come back. It takes those tropes and it turns it. So, instead of a plantation, it's a decaying plantation that could be haunted, or, everyone inside of that plantation, they have slowly um, like they're representing kind of how the plantation is decaying. They themselves are also kind of losing themselves in a way. So it takes these tropes that we're so used to and it looks at the darker side of the South. So if we're talking about a preacher, then that preacher in a Southern Gothic literature, there's dark undertones there. Like he may be stealing from the congregation, he may be having affairs. So it really looks at the other side of humanity and it doesn't really shy away from dark topics. And that's what I love the most about Southern Gothic is that as humans, there are multiple sides to us. And Southern Gothic is not afraid to really explore what those sides are.
Wow. Yeah, that's really awesome. I will sort of like do my own research on that genre. But
What
yeah,
do you read,
I
Ron?
read, I don't know what I read. I read a lot of nonfiction and I read a
Okay.
lot of like philosophy stuff and like I read a lot of like old European stuff, like or just I don't know, like older American stuff. Like I've been reading like Walden, by
Really?
I think it's like I forgot his name, but he did Walden. I think it's like Henry David Thoreau or something like that. I'm
Okay.
I read like Hemingway. I read When the Bell Tolls. I read that. I read The Picture of Dorian Gray
I've
recently.
read that one.
I like that
That's
one a lot.
Gothic. That's
Yeah,
a
that one is
Gothic
gothic,
literature.
I guess. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that one.
Hmm.
I'm reading Buddenbrooks, which is like a German. It's like a 18th century like German, really long novel that goes through like this family over generations and like their decline over generations, and it's like really interesting. I really like things that have to do with like philosophy and
Yeah.
even like economic stuff or just how people live, but it's like in a packaged in like a fiction story.
Yeah.
I just think that stuff is like really fascinating.
It would take me a while to get through a philosophy book. Like I am interested in philosophy. I can listen to someone talk to me about philosophy all day. But when it comes to sitting down and reading a scholarly book about philosophy, that would take me so long to get through just because of the ideas. And I'm a processor. So I would always want to process every bit of information I'm reading, which means it could be 5 years by the time I get through all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to get through, and I'm sort of just starting on branching into more fiction because I have Audible and like I feel like I'm always listening to like nonfiction stuff, like
Yeah,
just I don't know, just about topics I'm interested in, like more as like a personal development thing. But I started getting into more fiction recently, and I really like it, and I plan to like read more fiction for
mm,
sure. Yeah,
that's cool.
yeah. Do you have any hopes for, I guess, the future of like where you want to go with your book? Are you working on anything else right now?
Yeah. I'm always working on other things. My creativity means that there will be like 10 different projects in the background. The story that I just finished writing, that I just got over to my agent, it's about a teenager who wants to swim the English Channel with his sister. And so during his senior year, his school is in Washington State. It's a boarding academy called St. Cloud. It's a boarding school called St. Cloud Academy. And so during that year, he is preparing to swim the English Channel, but he's also kind of wrestling with a reality that he hasn't spoken to his sister in a few months. So he's preparing for that swim with her, but he has no idea what's going on with her. So it's a back and forth of kind of like, what am I feeling? Where is she? What's going on? And also, he's a perfectionist. So, still trying to stay on top of his grades and on top of training for the swim. So, it's really kind of really mentally exhausting for him.
Okay, wow, that's a cool story. Did you get the inspiration from anything?
So, I was thinking, the way that it initially came up is that I was thinking, okay, so how many Black people do I know that swim competitively? And then how many Black people have swam the English Channel? And that's where I kind of started. And so I also like, the United Kingdom. That's somewhere where I want to go one day. So that's when I started to just, create this character with the concept of he and his sister, they want to swim the English Channel. And then I just started to research how many Black people had swam it, how many people have swam it in general, and what does it take to do that? Like, how long do you have to prepare? What is the process for that? And that is how I came up with the initial idea of that story.
Okay, that's really awesome. Yeah, I think like just hearing you say that, talk about it, reminds me of like how much work goes into fiction because you actually have to know like so much about, the setting, the
Hmm.
historical, if it's like in the past, you have to know about like what's going on in the present moment, in that place. And do you
Right.
find it like challenging? I guess because it's like you're writing about a place that I guess you aren't that familiar with, I'm guessing.
Hmm.
So I'm assuming that's a lot more challenging than maybe writing about something where you live.
Yeah. That's one of the things I love about most about writing fiction is that, as we said earlier, I exist in my shoes all of the time. I have lived in Maryland, I've lived in Virginia, I lived in New Orleans, I lived in Dallas. And so for me, I just love to have an excuse to go travel somewhere else. And so if I haven't physically been there, then it gives me like I've never visited Washington State where the school is set. And so a lot of that story is actually spent over there. So what I do is I'll go on YouTube, I'll watch videos of it's set in the Pacific Northwest. So I'll watch videos about like that setting. I will read up on what the temperature is, like when does it rain, what flowers bloom there, and try to picture what the setting looks like. And so for that particular book, like after I write it, after I finish it and I get that final edit in, I want to actually go to Washington as like kind of a treat to
Yeah.
celebrate it. And then so when I do like my final edit on it, then I can actually say, oh, I've been there. So I can visualize it and add to the descriptions that I've already written.
That's awesome. I really like that process because you're doing your research and you're doing it, and then at the end you like go there and get like the last 5% or whatever, and you like figure it
Right.
out. You just get like a taste for it, maybe the smell or like something really
That's it.
physical that you can experience.
And that's exactly it, like the smell, because that's one thing that I'm writing about. Like it's very aesthetic when I'm trying to think about what does it look like, what does it smell like. Like I'm imagining that it smells very green. Like what does a rainforest smell like? What does the beach smell like? And so like I'm writing what I think it smells like, but that's why I need to actually go. So because I have it written already, I already know, well, I need to know this because it's written. So I don't have to try to think while I'm there about what descriptions I need. It's already written. So I can just say, I need to go here, I need to know this, and then I can add to what I already have.
Okay, awesome. That's cool. And then what does your writing process look like as far as like what you do to write? When you sit down, are you in front of your computer? Are you in your room? Do you have like music playing? Like do you have any rituals or something that you do when you like get down to work?
Yeah, my writing is very it really depends. Like if I'm writing something sad, I have a playlist. I put all of my music in a certain categories so it can kind of vibe with what I'm writing. So if there's something sad, there's a playlist for that. If it's like a happy scene I'm writing, there's a playlist for that. I always will light candles. Like I'll have a specific candle for that book just to kind of evoke the feeling of being in that place. If it's raining in the book, then I'll go to YouTube and I'll put on a video that has just like those rain sounds. And yeah, it just really depends. Usually I will pick actors to play my characters. So I can also have that visual of kind of how they might look like. It's not never exactly how that actor I pick looks like, but it's something similar. So there's just a lot of visual, a lot of smells from the candles and the music. So all the senses are kind of covered when I'm writing.
That's awesome. So you actually pick like actual actors
Hmm.
and you sort of like imprint that in a certain way onto your character so you can have
Yeah,
a more physical sense of like their mannerisms and stuff like that or how they
it
look.
re- it really helps in making sure that the story gets done because I get distracted so easily. So if I see that actor, then I'm like, oh, that's Ethan. I need to finish writing Ethan's story. And that really helps me in kind of keeping on track and pulling the character into the real world with me by having a face to, like to see and to be like, oh, well, that's Ethan. So it really helps to have like a physical person as the face of that character.
That's really cool. I would have never thought about that. That's like a really
But
cool
I'm
tactic.
I'm sure with your music, there's so many things that you do that I wouldn't think about because I don't write music.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but I think one thing about me and my music is I started out like I didn't formally learn how to songwrite. I just started doing it like on my computer
Yeah.
at home and stuff like that. And I figured out like I had some piano lessons and some singing lessons and stuff, but like I basically figured out a lot of stuff on my own.
Wow.
And so I'm really good on the computer, like making a beat, producing it. And now I started to take songwriting lessons. And now I'm going back to square one and learning, okay, this is like how you write the chorus, this is how you write the verse, these are like the chords you use. And I'm like simplifying my process so much. And it's like helping me in so many ways. But like in some ways, I'm like very advanced. In some ways, I'm like a beginner. Like it's so weird.
Yeah.
I don't know if you feel
As
like
cre-
that too with like how you started, maybe some people started in a more formal way or they have a different background so it influences their work in different ways.
yeah, I think that as creatives, we're always learning. And since I'm always creating new characters, I'm really always learning something new. Like I always try some different device. There's always something new that they're interested in. And that's one way that I get to explore by creating characters that have hobbies or um, quirks that I know nothing about. And so it allows me to do some research and, go on this deep dive to discover who this character is. And like, for example, if I have a character that plays lacrosse, I've never played lacrosse. If I have a character that plays football, I've never done that. So, I learn so I can write this character because usually it's in first person. So I need to know, okay, well, he plays football. This is not brand new to him. So it's brand new to me, but I need to learn, you know, terminology. I need to learn, like, how he navigates these things. So it's really like always learning something in the process.
Awesome. Cool. And yeah, it's definitely always about learning. Creativity is like literally you can never end, like there's never an end. You just have to like keep on going. Yeah. Do you have anything? Because maybe we should wrap up soon, but like, do you have anything you want to say or you just want to leave people with or like anything like that? Just for us to look out for if you have any events coming up or just, where to find you online or anything that people should know.
Yeah. Well, I will say, for anyone that really wants to be a writer or creative, the most important thing is just sticking to it, like continuing to do it every day, continuing to show up. Because for me, there were so many times when I could have just given up between like starting to write and then getting my book published was years, maybe it was a decade. And it was just constant, I'm going to keep trying, so I kept pushing. It wasn't really an easy process for me, but I never gave up. And so anyone that wants to be a writer or wants to be a creator in any way, my best advice is to keep going, keep doing it. And also just you really have to believe in yourself because at the end of the day, so many people have opinions. And for me, I'm sending my books out to agents. So there will be agents that, there were agents that didn't like, it's not that they didn't like the book, but it's just that it was not something that spoke to them. But eventually I found an agent where my book spoke to her. And eventually that summer night on Frenchmen Street got published. And so a lot of times we look at creatives and we see the thing that got them, to where they are, but we don't know about all of the other things before that. So that's what I would just like to say, keep going. Ron, I know you also have that experience as well, where we're not seeing even half of all of the songs you've written, all of the songs that you have produced. There's still so many out there that people don't even know about. They don't know about your process completely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true, yeah. There's only people see the tip of the iceberg, for sure.
That's right.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm on Instagram. It's literally underscore caffeinated. I have a website. I'm still working on that, and I have a Twitter page, but I don't use that as much. But I would say the best way is Instagram.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for joining on the Brain Dump podcast. This was really awesome, and I'm really glad to share this with people.
Thank you so much, Ron, for inviting me. Thank you for such great questions, and I really enjoy talking about my creative process.
All right, thanks. Hey everyone, thank you guys for watching this episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. I'm going to have more coming soon, and I'm always open to suggestions, or tell me what you liked about this episode. Who else you want to see on the podcast. I'm really working on getting some interesting guests for you. So I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.